The courthouse basement smelled of wet coats, toner, and the cheap barley tea that came from a machine with one button missing. I spent most mornings there with a plastic badge clipped to my cardigan, my hair tied back with a black elastic that had lost its patience months before, and my hands moving between two people who usually hated each other too much to listen. My name is Yoon Tae-in. I was 29, an Omega, and a certified Korean Sign Language interpreter for family court hearings, hospital appointments, and the occasional school meeting where everyone pretended the child in the room was not the only adult present. I liked the work because it required precision. A hand lifted half a second too late could turn a question into an accusation. A softened expression could make a judge think someone was less afraid than they were. Words made noise. Hands carried evidence. On the day my life became a file with a red sticker, I was interpreting for a woman named Go Yoon-hee, while her ex-husband's lawyer argued that her hearing impairment made her an unreliable parent. I remember the fluorescent lights flickering above us. I remember Yoon-hee's daughter sitting near the wall with her knees pressed together and a rabbit charm hanging from her backpack. I remember thinking that if I ever became the kind of adult who watched a frightened child and thought first about leverage, I hoped someone would remove me from society with a firm but polite shovel. I translated the lawyer's words exactly, even the ugly ones. Then I translated Yoon-hee's answer exactly too. She did not raise her voice. Her hands were steady. "My daughter knows when I am listening," she signed. "He only knows when he is being obeyed." The judge did not smile, but his pen stopped moving for a moment. That was usually the closest thing to victory in that room. After the hearing, I walked Yoon-hee and her daughter to the hallway vending machines because the girl had been staring at the strawberry milk as if it were a legal right. My friend Kim Ara, another interpreter, leaned against the wall with a stack of forms tucked under one arm and a face that said she had slept 3 hours but intended to win a war before lunch. "You made Attorney Choi swallow his tongue," she said. "I only translated." "You translated him into sounding like himself. Some men find that traumatic." I bought the strawberry milk. Yoon-hee signed thank you with both hands, and her daughter bowed so deeply her rabbit charm hit her chin. Moments like that kept me from quitting on bad days. Not because they healed anything large, but because they reminded me that ordinary decency could still enter a building through the basement. My own life outside the courthouse was built from small arrangements. I rented a 2-room apartment in Mangwon with my younger half-sister, Yo-jin, who was 19 and had the rare talent of making poverty look like a temporary design choice. She painted old jars, turned delivery boxes into shelves, and once convinced me that cracked bowls looked European if you placed them near a window. During the day, she worked part-time at a bakery and prepared a portfolio for art school. At night, she left sketches of strangers on the kitchen table, a woman holding a sleeping child on the subway, a delivery rider stretching his wrists, me standing over instant noodles with the expression of a man betrayed by hot water. She drew me kinder than I deserved. Our mother had died 2 years earlier after a long illness that taught me too much about hospital billing and not enough about grief. Yojin's father, my stepfather, had disappeared before the funeral flowers wilted. He left behind a debt in my name, a forged guarantor form, and a message saying he would fix it soon. People who intend to fix things do not usually vanish after writing soon. The lenders were not banks. They were men who wore clean shoes in dirty stairwells and spoke with the calm of people who had other people's fear scheduled between lunch and dinner. I had survived them by paying what I could, arguing what I could, and keeping records of everything. Receipts in a blue folder, voice recordings backed up on 2 drives, photographs of bruises on our door after someone kicked it in January. I knew enough law from work to be irritating, but not enough to be safe. Ara had introduced me to a legal aid attorney named Park Mira, who warned me that forged debts could be challenged, but only if I could keep breathing long enough for the paperwork to matter. That afternoon, after court, I took the bus to a hospital in Sinchon and interpreted for an elderly deaf man whose son kept answering questions meant for him. Then I stopped at the market for radish, eggs, and discounted tangerines with bruised skins. My routines were not elegant, but they were mine. I liked washing rice while Yojin complained about bakery customers. I liked repairing the loose hinge on our cabinet with a screwdriver borrowed from the building manager. On Sundays, I taught basic sign language to children at a community center and told them that their hands were not decorations for words, but language itself. I had private ambitions too. One day, I wanted to open a small interpretation studio that paired deaf parents with patient lawyers, doctors, and teachers. I had a notebook for it. A name, a budget, a list of people I trusted. The budget page was mostly fiction, but fiction had kept many people alive until reality improved. When I reached our apartment, 2 men were waiting outside the door. They were not the usual collectors. Those men liked leather jackets and loud threats. These 2 wore dark coats cut to fit their shoulders and stood with the stillness of expensive furniture. One of them held a phone. The other looked at my grocery bag as if the eggs might confess something useful. "Yoon Tae-in?" the taller one asked. I shifted the bag to my left hand. "That depends on whether you are selling insurance or ruining my evening." His eyebrows moved a fraction. "Director Jang requests 10 minutes. Director Jang can request through email like a civilized predator." The shorter man made the mistake of glancing at my door. I stepped between him and the lock before thinking, which told me my instincts had been living in worse neighborhoods than my body. "No one goes inside," I said. "We are not here for your sister." People who say that rarely improve the conversation. The taller man handed me a card. It was thick, cream-colored, and carried one name in black, Jang Ki-seok. Under it, in smaller letters, Hwasung Logistics Holdings. I knew the company the way everyone in Seoul knew certain buildings, by looking away from them politely. Hwasung delivered medical supplies, handled private security, sponsored hospital wings, and appeared in too many court rumors with too few convictions. My stepfather's lenders had mentioned Hwasung once, like a curse or a prayer. Neither version comforted me. "Tell Director Jang," I said, "that if this is about a debt, I require written notice and proof of assignment." It is not that simple. Men in dark coats always say that. It makes them feel literary. The taller man studied me. His mouth did not smile, but his attention sharpened. "Tomorrow evening, 8. The address is on the back." "I work tomorrow evening. Director Jang knows." That landed colder than I wanted it to. I looked at the card again, then at the men. "Then, Director Jang also knows I am not impressed by stalking. He knows you refused to mistranslate a witness this morning." The hallway seemed to narrow. Somewhere inside our apartment, Yojin dropped something, cursed softly, then played music too loud to pretend she had not been eavesdropping. "What does that have to do with him?" The taller man opened his mouth, closed it, and chose a safer sentence. "He said you would ask that." "Charming. He can answer it himself. He intends to." I kept the card because throwing it back would have felt satisfying for 3 seconds and stupid for longer. After the men left, I stood in the hallway until Yeojin opened the door and peered out with paint on her cheek. "Are we dying?" she asked. "Not tonight. I bought tangerines." "Those are related?" "In this family, optimism is seasonal fruit." She took the grocery bag, but not the card. Her gaze caught the name anyway. "Hwasung?" I removed my shoes. "Go wash your hands." Tae-in. When I know something, you will know something. That is your way of saying you know nothing. It is my way of saying the rice needs cooking before we panic. She hated when I did that. turned fear into chores. I hated it too sometimes. But panic had never paid rent, and rice had to be washed, whether powerful men learned your schedule or not. The next day, 3 things happened in the wrong order. First, my morning hospital appointment canceled, which should have given me time to call Mira about the card. Second, Ara arrived at the courthouse with a bruise half hidden under makeup and said she had walked into a cabinet. Ara lived alone. Her cabinets were not known for sudden violence. Third, my bank app showed a deposit I had not made. 20 million won, marked debt adjustment hold. I stared at the screen in the courthouse bathroom while someone knocked on the stall beside mine and sobbed into a phone. Mira answered on the 4th ring. "Tell me you did not touch the money." I did not touch the money. "Good. Screenshot everything. Send me the card." I did. Her silence lasted too long. "Where are you?" "Court. Do not go home alone tonight. Mira." "I mean it. Jang Ki-seok's name is attached to a succession dispute inside Hwasong. His grandfather died last month. There are rumors about a family council vote." "What does that have to do with my stepfather's debt?" "Possibly nothing. Possibly he bought the debt to reach you." "Reach me for what?" I am trying very hard not to guess. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My cardigan had a coffee stain near the sleeve. My hair was escaping its elastic. I did not look like someone worth a criminal heir's elaborate attention. I looked like a man who needed sleep and a better umbrella. That evening, I went to the address because staying away would not make me safer. Mira came with me as legal counsel, wearing a gray suit, and the expression she used when opposing counsel underestimated her. Ara insisted on walking us to the taxi. She refused to explain the bruise. I refused to let it go, which meant we exchanged the kind of argument close friends have when both are too frightened to say the true subject out loud. The address belonged to a private residence in Seongbuk-dong, hidden behind stone walls and old pine trees. A guard checked our IDs. Another scanned our phones but allowed Mira to keep hers after she said, sweetly, that any attempt to confiscate counsel's device would become the first paragraph of her complaint. We were led into a library where the shelves reached the ceiling, and every object looked as if it had been chosen by someone who distrusted color. Jang Ki-seok stood by the window, reading a file. He was not handsome in the comfortable way people used for advertisements. His face was too controlled for that, clean lines and quiet severity, as if every expression had to pass a security check before appearing. He wore a charcoal suit without a tie. His hair was black, his hands bare, his posture almost still. Professionally terrifying was a phrase I had heard applied to senior judges. Looking at him, I understood that the phrase had other uses. He closed the file. Yoon Tae-in. Director Jang. His gaze moved to Mira. Attorney Park. Mira sat before he invited us. I loved her a little for that. You transferred money into my client's account without consent. I placed funds in escrow under his name to prevent collection activity. That is a polished way to say you interfered with a disputed debt. It was already being used to coerce him. My hand tightened around my bag strap. You know a great deal about coercion for a stranger. Yes, there was no shame in his answer. That made it worse. He gestured to the table. A contract lay there, printed on heavy paper, each page marked with tabs. Beside it sat copies of my debt documents, photographs of our damaged door, Yojin's art school application, and a report on my stepfather that made my mouth go dry. Mira's voice sharpened. You investigated his sister? I investigated the threat to her. You placed her name on a table to make a point. Ki-seok looked at her. The point is that the men approaching them are not independent lenders. They answer to my uncle. That changed the room. Even the air seemed to pause. I remained standing. Why would your uncle care about me? Because I care about the outcome of your last hearing. The custody case? The opposing lawyer in that case works for a law office retained by my uncle. He needed the mother discredited because her ex-husband holds shares through a nominee company. You translated accurately. That cost my uncle a useful witness and embarrassed his counsel. I stared at him. So your family noticed me because I did my job. My family notices anything that refuses to bend. That sounds exhausting. It is. Mira flipped through the contract with quick, precise fingers. What do you want? Ki-seok's answer was so direct that I almost preferred manipulation. A spouse. I laughed once. It came out wrong. You should try a dating app. His expression did not change. My grandfather's succession instrument requires me to be married before the council vote in 6 weeks. A spouse from the usual families ties me to one faction and gives another faction grounds to challenge. I need someone publicly defensible, legally clean, and difficult to intimidate. Flattery is usually warmer, I said. I am not flattering you. No, I noticed. Mira kept reading. 12-month contractual marriage, separate bedrooms, no sexual obligations, no reproductive expectations, public appearances limited to listed events, financial protection for the spouse's household, debt litigation funded through independent counsel chosen by spouse, security detail subject to written boundaries, spouse may continue employment, exit conditions after counsel certification or mutual dissolution, compensation structured as damages for privacy loss and labor, not purchase price. She looked up. This is either unusually careful or unusually predatory. Both things can share a table, I said. Ki-seok's gaze returned to me. I did not bring you here to trap you without terms. You brought my sister's life into a room and placed a marriage contract next to it. Yes. Mira inhaled sharply, but Ki-seok continued before she could attack. I will not pretend the circumstances are clean. They are not. Your stepfather's debt has been weaponized. Your sister's application is being watched. Your friend Kim Ara has been pressured through her father's medical debt because she works beside you. My uncle believes people like you are useful until frightened. I need a spouse who proves my household cannot be managed by fear. You need my uncle's hands removed from your life. The contract is a bad answer. I am offering it because the good answers are too slow. I hated that he did not soften it. I also hated that part of me preferred the bluntness. Lies often arrived wrapped in concern. He had brought a knife and labeled it a knife. Mira requested an hour alone with me. Ki-seok gave us the library and left without argument, which was the first thing he did that did not make me want to throw something. The door clicked shut. Mira spread the contract across the table and rubbed her forehead. You do not have to do this, she said. I know. Do you? I know I can refuse. I also know refusal does not make his uncle forget us. She lowered her voice. Marriage, even contractual, is not a raincoat. You cannot take it off once the storm passes and expect your clothes to be dry. I am aware. Tae-in. I am tired of men using paperwork I did not sign to decide where my sister can sleep. Her expression changed then. Less lawyer, more friend. Then we revised this until it belongs to you too. So we did. We added that the escrow money could not be reclaimed, even if I refused physical cohabitation after documented breach. We added that Yeojin's education fund would be placed in an independent trust managed by Mira, not Hwasung. We added that my work schedule would remain mine, that any security assigned to me would be introduced by name and dismissed at my request except under immediate threat, that no medical information, Omega status documentation, or family record could be shared with his relatives. We added a clause stating that if Ki-seok used my sister, my friend, or my clients to force personal compliance, the marriage would dissolve automatically, and the protections would remain. Mira enjoyed writing that sentence so much she underlined it twice before remembering contracts did not appreciate emotions. When Ki-seok returned, he read every change without sitting. His face revealed nothing, but his thumb paused over the clause about coercion. "Problem?" I asked. "No," he initialed it. "Necessary." I had expected negotiation, objection, perhaps a lecture about practical limits. He gave none. That unsettled me more than resistance would have. "You are agreeing quickly," Mira said. "I asked for a person who would not be decorative. I do not get to complain when he proves it." I looked away first, irritated by the small heat in my face. Do not make that sound charming. It was barely civil. Civil is sufficient. For a husband? For survival. There it was, the honest name of the thing. Survival. Not romance, not rescue, not destiny. A narrow bridge over a deep drop. I signed because I could see the drop behind me. Ki-seok signed after me, his handwriting straight and controlled. Mira witnessed both signatures with the grim focus of a woman attending a legal funeral. The marriage registration happened 2 days later in a ward office where a toddler screamed near the chairs and an elderly couple argued about a missing stamp. I wore my cleanest navy coat. Ki-seok wore another gray suit. Mira stood beside me. One of Ki-seok's men, a quiet beta named Na-hyun, handled the Q ticket and looked embarrassed every time the toddler pointed at his earpiece. The clerk glanced at our documents, then at Ki-seok's face, and decided questions were a luxury. When the stamp came down, I expected some dramatic sensation. Instead, the printer jammed. The clerk cursed under her breath, opened a drawer, and pulled out a plastic ruler to scrape at the paper. My legal marriage began with toner on someone's thumb. Outside, Ki-seok handed me a folder. "Your copy." Traditional. Should I throw rice? "No. You are very committed to romance. I thought we agreed on survival." "Survival can have jokes. Otherwise people become furniture." Na-hyun coughed. It might have been laughter. Ki-seok looked at him, and Na-hyun immediately found the sidewalk fascinating. Moving into Ki-seok's house felt less like entering marriage than entering a museum that disliked visitors. The residence in Seongbuk-dong had stone paths, dark wood floors, and windows placed to make every view look intentional. My assigned room had a bed large enough to make loneliness seem measurable and a desk positioned near the garden. Someone had placed new towels in the bathroom, unscented soap by the sink, and a kettle with barley tea bags on the tray. "I drink barley tea because courthouse machines are cheap," I said from the doorway. Ki-seok stood behind me, one hand in his pocket. "You chose it 3 times during meetings." That could have been coincidence. "You refused coffee twice." That could have been trauma. Is it? No, I just hate coffee that tastes like burnt paperwork. I will inform the kitchen. The kitchen does not need a briefing on my emotional relationship with beverages. He turned toward the hallway. It already received one. I stared after him. That was a joke. He paused. Was it? I could not tell if he was serious. That became the shape of our first week. Me trying to identify the edges of his humor. Him trying to identify why anyone would use humor while surrounded by threats. We were formal in public and awkward in private. He introduced me to the staff by my full name and legal position, not as property, not as an accessory. At dinner, he sat across from me and asked whether I needed any changes to the security schedule. I said I needed his men to stop appearing behind potted plants like guilty ghosts. The next morning, the guards wore small name pins. Na-hyun said Ene-hyun, security, as if he were attending kindergarten. Yojin visited on the 4th day with a backpack full of sketchbooks and suspicion. She walked through Ki-seok's entrance hall, looked at the art on the walls and whispered, If I touch anything, will someone invoice my descendants? Probably, I said. Ki-seok appeared at the stairs. Your descendants are safe. Yojin blinked. He makes jokes? That is under investigation. She bowed too politely. Thank you for helping my brother. Ki-seok answered with equal formality. He negotiated the help. Her eyes moved to me. I knew that look. She wanted to ask whether I was frightened. She did not want to ask in front of him. Ki-seok saw it too. I have a call, he said. Use the garden room as long as you like. After he left, Yojin grabbed my sleeve. Are you okay? No, but I am more okay than last week. That is not a normal scale. We come from a creative family. She sat on the garden room sofa and pulled her knees up, suddenly 19 in a way she rarely allowed. The school called. They moved my portfolio interview earlier. I think someone helped. Mira filed the trust paperwork. I do not want to go if it means you stay here alone. I sat beside her. Outside, a pine branch scraped softly against the window. You are not the price of my decisions. That is what people say before doing terrible math. I laughed because it hurt. Listen to me. I signed a bad contract to escape a worse trap. That does not mean you must build a little shrine to guilt and live inside it. Her eyes filled, which made her angry. You always make things sound ridiculous when they are serious. Because serious things already have enough confidence. She wiped her cheek with her sleeve. I want the interview. Good. I also want you to come home. I know. She did not ask if Ki-seok was kind. Perhaps she knew kind was not the right question yet. The first public event was a hospital foundation dinner where everyone knew our marriage was strategic and pretended not to know with the elegance of expensive education. Ki-seok's family occupied the central table. His uncle, Jang Mu-yeol, was a silver-haired alpha with a mild voice and hands that never rested. He greeted me as our unexpected nephew-in-law and smiled as if the word unexpected had teeth. So you are the interpreter, he said. I am. Useful skill. In families like ours, silence is often misunderstood. In court, silence usually means someone has stopped feeling safe enough to speak. His smile thinned. Sharp. Occupational hazard. Ki-seok stood beside my chair, not touching it. His presence changed the temperature around the table. Tae-in does not perform for inspection. But he signed for public life, Mu-yeol said. I signed for listed appearances, I said before Ki-seok could answer. Not for uncle examinations. Those require a separate fee. A woman across the table pressed her napkin to her mouth. Ki-seok's mother, Jang Ki-seok, watched me with an unreadable expression. She was elegant in a cream jacket, her hair pinned low, her face composed in the way of someone who had survived rooms by becoming part of the architecture. Later, when the men discussed foundation votes in soft voices, she leaned toward me. You should eat, she said. I am not hungry. That is rarely relevant at these dinners. I looked at the untouched fish on her plate. I see. Her mouth curved just enough to count as a warning or sympathy. Do not let them make you spend all evening proving you are not afraid. Fear is not a confession. I had not expected help from her. That made me cautious. Thank you. I did not help. She lifted her glass. I made an observation. After dinner, a reporter outside called our marriage suspicious. Ki-seok's hand hovered near my back without landing. I noticed because he did not use the crowd as an excuse to touch me. I answered the reporter myself. Most marriages look suspicious to people who are not inside them, I said. Are you in love with director Jang? No comment. Ki-seok guided me toward the car only after I moved. Inside, he said, You handled that well. I lied by omission with moderate grace. You did not owe them truth. I know. I owed myself not to sound like furniture. His gaze turned from the window to me. No one mistakes you for furniture. You have not seen me before breakfast. Na-hyun in the front seat coughed again. The first real argument came over my work. Ki-seok wanted a security escort inside the courthouse basement. I refused because my clients did not need men in suits witnessing their worst mornings. He said the risk had increased after the foundation dinner. I said his family's risk did not get to swallow the privacy of abused spouses and frightened children. We stood in his kitchen at midnight, a place too clean for an argument, while rain tapped the windows. "You are visible now," he said. "I was visible before you. Poor people are visible to the wrong eyes all the time. My uncle will not approach you gently. Neither will the judge if I bring intimidation into a family hearing." His jaw tightened. "This is not about intimidation. It is when the person being protected loses control of the room." He looked at the counter, then at the untouched tea cooling between us. "I am trying to keep you alive, and I am trying to keep my life recognizable." For a moment, I thought he would issue an order. His family had carved command into his posture. I could see the habit rising, the clean, efficient answer. "You agreed. Threats require response. I know more than you." He swallowed it. The movement was small, but it cost him something. "Name the boundary," he said. I folded my arms because my hands wanted to shake. "No visible escort in client areas. Na-hyun can wait outside the building. If there is a specific threat, you tell me enough for me to make decisions. Not vague warnings. Enough may reveal sources." Then, reveal carefully. He looked at me for a long second. Agreed. I expected relief. Instead, I felt the discomfort of having prepared for a wall and found a door. That night, he sent a written amendment to Mira. In the morning, Na-hyun waited across the street from the courthouse with a paper cup of barley tea and a name pin on his coat. He looked miserable. "Did Director Jang make you wear that in public?" I asked. "He said it reduces plant-related complaints." I took the tea. "He listens selectively." "He listens more than he admits. Do not make him sound human before 9. Na-hyun's mouth twitched. "Understood." The next disruption arrived on a Sunday morning, which felt rude. I believed Sundays deserved protection under law, especially the hour before my community center class when I sharpened pencils, arranged picture cards, and pretended that 8 children would not immediately turn every worksheet into a paper airplane. The center occupied the second floor of an old building above a hardware store in Hapjeong. The walls were pale yellow, the heater clicked like an elderly insect, and the storage cabinet smelled faintly of glue sticks. It was the only room in my week where nobody asked me to translate cruelty into polite grammar. I arrived early and found the door unlocked. Inside, the chairs had been pushed into a crooked pile. The whiteboard had been wiped clean, except for one sentence written in black marker, "Your hands will not save you." A box of laminated alphabet cards lay scattered across the floor. Someone had stepped on the card for family until the plastic split through the middle. For a few seconds, I felt nothing useful. Then I picked up the broken card and heard footsteps on the stairs. Na-hyun appeared first, breath controlled but eyes sharp. Ki-seok came behind him without a coat, his shirt sleeves rolled to the forearms as if he had left in the middle of something. I had not called him. Ara had. She arrived 30 seconds later, hair still damp, carrying coffee for 3 people and rage enough for the entire building. "Class is cancelled," Ki-seok said. "No," I answered. Ara stopped in the doorway. "Tae-in." "No, the children arrive in 40 minutes. If they find this, they learn that threats can close language. I will not teach that." Ki-seok looked at the room. His face became very still, and for the first time, I saw how anger lived in him when he kept it from becoming action. It did not flare. It organized. "We need to preserve evidence. Then preserve it quickly. A threat has been made against you in a classroom. Yes, and the classroom still belongs to the children. He looked at me then, really looked, with the same concentration he gave documents that changed outcomes. I expected him to insist. I had even prepared my argument. Instead, he turned to Na-hyun. Photograph everything. 15 minutes. After that, we clean according to Tae-in's instructions. Na-hyun did not hesitate. Ara set the coffee down and began collecting the crushed cards with trembling hands. When the first child arrived, the room smelled of disinfectant and marker remover. The chairs were straight. The broken family card had been taped carefully from the back. Ki-seok stood in the hallway, out of sight from the classroom, because I had asked him not to let his security become the first lesson of the day. Through the narrow window beside the door, I could see the edge of his shoulder. He stayed there for 90 minutes while I taught signs for weather, school, and feelings. One boy invented a sign for dragon that involved nearly hitting his cousin in the nose. A girl named Min-seo signed angry with such theatrical force that Ara laughed for the first time all morning. At the end of class, Min-seo's mother, who had noticed too much despite our cleaning, pulled me aside. She was a beta woman with cracked hands from restaurant work and the habit of bowing before she asked for anything. "Teacher," she said, "if people are troubling you because of us—" "Not because of you," I said. "Never because of you." Ki-seok heard that. I knew because the next day, instead of sending guards, he sent a locksmith paid through the community center's maintenance fund and a donation receipt addressed not to me, not to himself, but to the center board. He also sent 3 new boxes of laminated cards without a note. The family card had been remade in thicker plastic. I held it under the classroom light and hated how grateful I felt. That evening, I carried the broken original back to his house. He was in the garden room, reading a report with a pen in his left hand. I placed the taped card on the table between us. "I am keeping this," I said. His gaze dropped to it. "As evidence?" "As a reminder." "Of what?" "That fear can be repaired badly and still used." He was quiet for a while. Outside, the garden stones shone with recent rain. "My father would have closed the class and moved you somewhere guarded." "I know." My first thought was the same. "I know that too." He looked at me then. "Does that make the later decision worthless?" "No. It makes it a decision." The line of his shoulders changed, not relaxing exactly, but lowering from a height he no longer needed. He reached toward the broken card, stopped before touching it, and waited for my nod. When I gave it, he traced the tape seam with one finger. "Family," he read softly. I did not ask what the word meant to him. He was still learning to answer without being cornered. Instead, I sat across from him and told him about Min-seo's dragon sign. He listened as if it mattered. Maybe that was the beginning of my trouble. He listened to small things without making them smaller. Yojin's portfolio interview became the next test of our arrangement in a way none of the contracts had predicted. She refused Ki-seok's driver, refused my offer to accompany her inside, and refused to wear the blouse I had ironed because, in her words, it made her look like a tax apology. She chose an oversized black sweater, silver hair clips shaped like stars, and shoes she had painted with tiny blue doors. At the school gate, she gripped her portfolio case until her knuckles paled. "I can go in with you," I said. "No, I can wait here." "Yes." Ki-seok stood several steps away near the car, close enough to be present and far enough not to claim the scene. Yojin glanced at him. "If I fail, do rich people have a department for revenge on admissions panels?" He considered this. "Probably. I do not recommend using it." "Because it is immoral?" "Because your brother would become unbearable." She laughed, and the sound loosened something in her shoulders. Then she looked at me, suddenly serious. "If I get in, I am still allowed to leave, right? Even if things with him are complicated? Even if you need me? The question cut cleanly because she had learned my habits too well. I wanted to say I did not need anyone. That was a lie pride told when it wore a respectable coat. I will need you, I said, and you will still be allowed to go. Her eyes reddened. That is unfair. Most freedom is. Go. She went. I watched until the glass doors swallowed her. Ki-seok came to stand beside me, leaving a careful space between our sleeves. You answered well, he said. I answered while wanting to chain her to a radiator. That is usually omitted from speeches about love. I am an honest educator. We waited for 2 hours at a cafe across the street. Ki-seok ordered tea and did not touch it. I graded children's homework, though every paper looked like Yojin's face. When my hand cramped, he pushed his fountain pen toward me. It writes more easily, he said. It looks expensive enough to have a lawyer. It was my grandfather's. I pushed it back. Then you should keep it. I dislike it. Why? He used it to sign away people who trusted him. The answer came with no dramatic weight, which made it heavier. I looked at the pen, black lacquer, gold clip, an object too polished for the history he had given it. Why carry it? To remember the shape of his hand. That sounds like punishment. It has been useful. Punishment often advertises itself as discipline. He did not answer. When Yojin finally emerged, waving both arms like a shipwreck survivor, we stood at the same time. She had not received a result yet. She had only survived the room. That was enough for celebration. We ate tteokbokki from a street stall because she demanded food that stains important people. Ki-seok stood under a red plastic awning holding a paper cup of fish cake broth, while Yojin explained color theory to him with the confidence of a general. He asked one question about negative space. She stared at him. You know art words? I sit in rooms with overpriced paintings. That does not mean you understand them. No. Good. Humility suits you. I had to turn away to hide my smile. Not because the scene was sweet, though it was, but because it was specific. He was not rescuing anyone. He was standing under an awning, being corrected by a 19-year-old with sauce on her sleeve, and choosing not to escape. Work did not become easier. My marriage became gossip in courthouse elevators. One clerk asked whether I had married up with a look that said she had never had to choose between rent and safety. Ara snapped at her before I could. Then, in the copy room, Ara's own composure cracked. She pressed both hands on the machine and stared at the green scanning light. My father's dialysis center cold, she said. The payment issue vanished. I stopped sorting forms. Vanished how? They said an anonymous fund covered 6 months. I knew before she said it. Ki-seok. I did not ask him. I know. I hate that I am relieved. I leaned against the counter. The copier warmed the air with plastic heat. Relief is not betrayal. It feels like being purchased by someone who did not even bother to send a receipt. I will ask. Do not. Her voice sharpened. No, ask. I do not know. That is the problem. I keep wanting help and resenting the shape of it. Her subplot, though she would have hated the word, had become entangled with mine. She had spent years taking extra assignments to pay for her father's care, letting senior interpreters hand her the worst cases, laughing it off because laughter was cheaper than refusal. Ki-seok's money removed one pressure but exposed another. She did not know who she was when exhaustion stopped being a badge. That evening, I went to Ki-seok's study without waiting to be summoned. He was reading council reports beside a lamp. A small scar crossed the knuckle of his right hand. I had noticed it before. That night I wondered what kind of childhood taught a person to keep even scars quiet. You paid Ara's father's clinic. Yes. Why? Because my uncle's office contacted the clinic last week. They intended to threaten payment delays if she testified about the courthouse approach. You could have told me. I should have. That stopped me. That was easier than expected. I am not confused about the error. Then why did you do it without asking? He closed the folder. I moved before thinking about how it would feel to her. Because money solves problems quickly. Because delay gets people hurt. Both can be true. So can the fact that she deserved a choice. He nodded once. I will apologize to her. She may throw tea. I have been injured by worse. Do not sound proud of that. His gaze dropped to his hand. It was not pride. The room changed, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed the door inside the conversation. I did not walk through it. Not yet. I only said, "Send the apology through me first. She likes precision." He did. The apology was short, almost severe, but it named the harm without defending itself. Ara read it twice in a cafe near the courthouse, then put her forehead on the table. "I hate him less," she said into the wood. "That is inconvenient." "I know." By the end of the month, our arrangement had developed muscles. Ki-seok attended council meetings. I attended hearings, hospital appointments, and one disastrous school consultation where a principal told a deaf boy's mother that accommodation requests were emotionally complicated. I interpreted the mother's answer with such calm that the principal apologized to the table. At home, Ki-seok's house, though I had started to say home in my head and then immediately correct myself, we shared some dinners when our schedules collided. He ate quietly, never looked at his phone at the table, and answered questions with the exact amount of information requested unless I bullied him into being more human. "What did you like as a child?" I asked once over grilled mackerel. He looked as if I had requested classified material. "Drawing maps." That surprised me. "Maps?" "Routes, buildings, exits. That is a bleak hobby." It was useful. Children are allowed useless hobbies. I was not a useful child. The sentence sat between us with its hands folded. He seemed to regret saying it, but he did not take it back. I thought of Yojin painting jars, of children at the community center shaping signs with sticky fingers, of how easily adults turn survival into praise. Before I could answer, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and stood. "My mother is here." "She calls from the driveway?" "She prefers witnesses for difficult conversations." Hae-suk entered the dining room in a dark coat, rain shining on her sleeves. She greeted me first, then told her son that his uncle intended to challenge the validity of our marriage by claiming coercion. "That is bold," I said, "considering everyone in this family appears to use coercion as table seasoning." Hae-suk glanced at me. "You are less intimidated than is healthy." "Health has been expensive lately." Ki-seok's voice cooled. "What does he want?" "To prove Tae-in was bought and remains dependent. He will offer him a settlement to leave before the vote, then leak the offer if he refuses." I set down my chopsticks. "So either I look greedy or trapped." "Both would serve him," Hae-suk said. Ki-seok turned toward me. "We can counter." "Not with me hidden behind your lawyers." He was silent. I leaned back. "If your uncle wants to discuss my dependents, we give him documentation that the protections survive dissolution, publicly if necessary." Hae-suk's eyes narrowed with interest. "You would reveal the contract?" "Parts. The parts that prove I can leave." Ki-seok said, "That exposes your sister's trust." "Not if Mira redacts it. It exposes you to commentary." "I was born an Omega in a country with elevators. Commentary found me before your family did." His mouth tightened, the closest he came to visible distress. "I do not like using your vulnerability as defense." "Good, then do not use it. Let me use my own facts." Hae-suk watched her son. Something passed across her face, brief and painful. He will struggle with that, I noticed. Ki-seok looked at his mother. You are enjoying this? No. Her voice softened. I am recognizing it. She left soon after, refusing tea. Ki-seok stood by the window long after her car disappeared. What did she mean? I asked. My father never let her speak for herself in council matters. He called it protection. There it was again, the word that could wear two faces. I joined him at the window, but kept distance between us. And you? I was taught to admire him. That is not an answer. No. His reflection in the glass looked older than his face. It is the problem. The emotional turn did not happen with music or a confession. It happened 3 days later in a hospital corridor at 2:12 a.m. Yeojin had collapsed at the bakery from exhaustion and a fever she had hidden because her portfolio interview was the next morning. I arrived half-dressed, hair wet from a rushed shower, terror moving under my skin like cold water. Ki-seok was already there. He had not called to announce it. He had not filled the hallway with men. He stood beside the vending machines, speaking quietly to the nurse, holding Yeojin's sketchbook in both hands as if it were glass. She is stable, he said when he saw me. The doctor thinks dehydration and infection. They are running tests. Why are you holding that? She asked for it. Then she fell asleep. I took the sketchbook. On the open page was a drawing of me at the garden room window and Ki-seok in the doorway behind me. He had not been drawn large. He had been drawn as a line that blocked nothing but stayed. I should have noticed she was sick, I said. You cannot interpret every silence in your own house. I do it for strangers. That is work. This is love. Love is worse at evidence. I looked at him then. He seemed startled by his own sentence. His shoulders had lost their exactness. His hair was slightly disordered, and there was a small red mark on his wrist where a hospital visitor sticker had been removed. For the first time, I saw not the heir, not the strategist, not the man who had bought time with contracts, but someone standing in fluorescent light because he did not know how to leave a frightened person alone. She called you, I said. He nodded. Not me. She said you would blame yourself before calling a taxi. I laughed, but it broke in the middle. Ki-seok moved one step, then stopped. He waited. That waiting undid me more than an embrace would have. I crossed the distance myself and pressed my forehead against his shoulder. He went very still. Then his hand rose, hovered, and settled lightly between my shoulder blades. Is this allowed? He asked. Yes. He exhaled like a man setting down a weapon he had carried too long. Yeojin recovered enough by dawn to demand her sketchbook and accuse us both of looking tragically married. Her interview was postponed with a medical note. Ki-seok arranged nothing without asking. Mira called the school, Ara brought porridge, and Yeojin spent 2 days in the garden room pretending not to enjoy being fussed over. The house changed while she was there. Staff left extra blankets. Na-hyun learned how she liked tangerines sliced. Ki-seok allowed her to mock an abstract painting in the hall without defending its value. That looks like an eggplant regretting a crime, she said. It cost more than your first year's tuition, I warned. Then it should have studied harder. Ki-seok looked at the painting. I never liked it, Yeojin beamed. Finally, taste. I watched them from the sofa and felt affection arrive with its shoes in its hands, trying not to make noise. That frightened me. Gratitude could impersonate tenderness. Safety could grow roots in the same soil as dependence. I had warned myself about this before signing. Yet the feeling did not behave like debt. It did not say you owe him. It said, look. He learned where to stand. After Yeojin returned to our apartment under Mira's supervision, I pulled away from Ki-seok for 3 days. I answered politely. I ate at different times. I worked late. He noticed, of course. He noticed everything. On the third night, he found me in the garden room repairing the spine of an old sign language textbook I used for children's classes. The cover had peeled at the corner. I was smoothing glue under the cloth with a bone folder. "Have I done something?" he asked. "Oh, yes." He stood near the doorway. "Tell me." "You made it easy to want you here." His face changed less than another man's might, but I had learned the language of him by then. The slight lowering of his gaze, the tension in his fingers. That was not my intention. I know, that is part of the problem. He did not enter the room without invitation. "Do you want distance?" "I want honesty with myself. Distance is easier to measure." "And me?" I pressed the cloth flat. "I do not know what I want from you." "I can wait." "That sounds noble. It may also be another way for you to control the terms." He accepted the hit. "Then set them." "You cannot ask me to decide everything so you remain innocent." His eyes lifted. "I am not innocent." The quiet in the room deepened. I put down the bone folder. He said, "I want to sit with you at dinner when there is no strategic reason. I want your sister to feel safe enough to insult my art. I want to know what case made you angry before you come home and pretend the rice cooker is your enemy. I want to touch you only when you choose it. I do not know how to want these things without making a plan around them, and that is my failure, not yours." He spoke like a man crossing a frozen river, each word tested before weight landed. No flourish, no plea. Just truth, cut down to what he could carry. I looked at my hands. Glue shone on my thumb. "I am afraid I will mistake your protection for love." "So am I." That answer brought my head up. Ki-seok's mouth tightened. "My father called possession protection. My uncle calls leverage responsibility. I do not trust my own first instinct with you. It is why I need the contract revised before I ask anything else." "What revision?" "The protections become permanent, not tied to marriage, not tied to cohabitation. Your sister's trust remains. Ara's father's clinic remains funded through an anonymous patient foundation that she can reject after 6 months without penalty. Your debt litigation continues with Mira regardless of us. I will sign before the council vote." I stared at him. "That weakens your position?" "Yes." "Your uncle will say the marriage is unnecessary. Then I will answer that I know." The bone folder rolled off the table and hit the floor. Neither of us moved to pick it up. "You would give up leverage before asking me to stay?" I said. He looked almost tired. "If I keep leverage, staying is meaningless. There are moments that ask to be trusted too quickly. I did not trust this one completely, but I respected it. Respect, I had learned, was slower than desire and more difficult to fake. The final pressure arrived at the council review in a room on the top floor of Hwasung's headquarters, where Seoul spread behind glass like a city under examination. Mira sat beside me with redacted documents. Ki-seok sat at the head of the table because his grandfather's will allowed him that seat until the vote. Muyol smiled as if the morning had already surrendered. He presented his challenge politely. He questioned my independence. He questioned the timing of the marriage. He questioned the financial arrangements. He suggested with elegant disgust that Ki-seok had exploited an omega in distress. I listened. Then I stood. Ki-seok's hand shifted on the table, a restrained instinct. He did not stop me. "I signed because I was in danger," I said. "That part is true. I signed because Director Jang offered legal protection, debt relief, and safety for people I love. That is also true. If your argument is that desperation makes consent complicated, I agree. It is why the protections have now been separated from the marriage." I placed the revised agreement on the table. As of this morning, I may leave without losing any promised legal or financial security. Muyol's smile became still. I continued, "So the question before this council is not whether I was purchased. I have documentation proving I cannot be controlled through the benefits. The question is why you are so eager to define protection as ownership." One of the older council members leaned forward. Hye-suk watched from the side wall, her hands folded. Muyol said, "You speak boldly for someone unfamiliar with our family. I interpret family disputes for a living. Yours has better suits, not better habits." A sound moved around the table, not quite laughter. Ki-seok looked down at his documents, but I saw the corner of his mouth change. Then Mira placed another file on the table. Ara had found the first thread, a pattern of court interpreters pressured through medical debt and assignment threats. Mira had pulled the records. I had identified the cases. Ki-seok's mother had provided foundation payment trails after deciding finally to stop being architecture. The file did not expose criminal operations. It exposed something harder for polished men to dismiss: misuse of a family foundation to influence court outcomes, documented cleanly enough to make regulators hungry. Muyol's face remained courteous. Only his fingers betrayed him. Ki-seok spoke then. "You used my father's methods and called them stability. You used my mother's silence and called it loyalty. You used vulnerable families and called it order. I will not inherit that." The council vote did not become dramatic. No one shouted. No one overturned a chair. Powerful families often rot quietly and call the smell tradition. The members withdrew, conferred, returned. Ki-seok won by 2 votes. Muyol congratulated him in a voice smooth enough to skate on and left with 3 loyalists behind him. The war did not end that day, but one door closed. Afterward, in a smaller conference room, Ki-seok signed the revised contract again in front of Mira. I signed only the acknowledgement that I had received independent protections. Not marriage obligations, not cohabitation terms, not performance requirements. My hand felt strangely light. Mira capped her pen. "Legally, you can leave this house today." Ki-seok did not look at me. That restraint made my throat ache. Ara hugged me in the hallway, then hugged Mira, then threatened to start an interpreters cooperative so no courthouse worker could be cornered alone again. Her father's care had stabilized. More importantly, Ara had stopped accepting every assignment as punishment for needing money. She was still tired. Freedom did not cure exhaustion overnight. But she had begun using the word no with a lawyer's precision and an artist's timing. Yojin got into art school. She showed us the acceptance letter in Ki-seok's kitchen, standing on a chair, because she said announcements required height. Na-hyun clapped first. Ki-seok clapped last, once he understood everyone else was doing it without irony. Yojin declared that his rhythm was corporate sadness and promised to teach him joy before graduation. I moved back to Mangwon for 2 weeks after the vote, not because I wanted to leave him, but because staying needed to become a decision I could recognize without emergency lighting. My apartment smelled like laundry soap, dried paint, and old rice. The cabinet hinge was loose again. The neighbors fought through the wall. Yojin slept surrounded by portfolio folders, one hand under her cheek. I returned to my court work, my hospital appointments, my Sunday classes. Na-hyun no longer followed me unless I asked, though he occasionally appeared near the market holding a shopping bag and pretending coincidence had excellent posture. Ki-seok called every evening at 9. Not to check whether I was safe, though I knew he wanted to, but to ask one question and answer one. The rule was mine. "What made you angry today?" he asked on Tuesday. A teacher who praised a deaf child for reading lips instead of giving him the notes he requested. "What did you refuse today?" My uncle's former ally offered me loyalty in exchange for keeping his title. I refused the title. Did that hurt? His pride or mine? Both. His more visibly. On Thursday I asked, "What did you like before maps?" A pause. "Birds." "You drew birds?" I watched them. Drawing them was difficult. Because they moved? Because I envied them. I sat on my old kitchen floor with the phone warm against my ear and did not make a joke. Some answers deserved not to be rescued from themselves. When I returned to Seongbuk-dong, I brought my own kettle, 3 chipped bowls Yo-jin had painted, and the repaired sign language textbook. Ki-seok met me at the entrance without staff, without a contract folder, without the armor of being expected. He looked at my small suitcase. "Is that all?" "For now." He nodded. "Your room is unchanged." "I know. The garden room has better light for your lesson materials." "I know that too." His hands were at his sides. I stepped closer, because the distance between us had been measured long enough. "I did not come back because you protected me," I said. "I know." "I did not come back because the house is safer." "I know." "I came back because I like the man who learned to ask before standing behind me." His breath changed. That was all. For him, it was almost a confession. "May I touch you?" he asked. "Yes." His hand rose to my cheek with the care of someone handling a page that could tear if rushed. I turned into it. The kiss that followed was quiet, almost awkward at first, because neither of us wanted to let habit make decisions for us. Then I laughed against his mouth because his nose bumped mine and he looked offended by physics. He made a low sound that might have been embarrassment, and I kissed him again before he could organize a response. There was tenderness in it, but also relief and grief for the versions of us who had needed signatures before trust. We did not need to hurry. We had spent enough time being chased. Life after that did not become simple. Ki-seok worked too much and sometimes turned concern into logistics before I raised an eyebrow and made him begin again. I forgot to warn him when hearings ran late and found 6 missed calls from Na-hyun, Mira, and Yo-jin in descending order of professionalism. Ara's cooperative rented a tiny office above a pharmacy, and I spent Saturdays there helping paint the walls. Hye-suk visited my Sunday class once and sat in the back while children taught her the sign for stubborn. She performed it correctly on the first try. The marriage contract was eventually dissolved by mutual agreement and replaced months later with a new registration that had no emergency clause attached. We did it at the same ward office. The same printer jammed. The clerk did not remember us, which felt appropriate. This time, Yo-jin threw paper flowers outside, and one stuck in Ki-seok's hair. He did not notice until a child from my class pointed and signed Flower Man with absolute delight. That evening, back at the house, I placed the repaired textbook on the garden room shelf beside Ki-seok's old childhood map notebook, the one he had finally shown me after pretending for 3 days that he did not know where it was. The first pages were all exits. The later pages, drawn by a boy who had wanted birds, showed rooftops, alleys, bridges, places a person might stand and not be seen. I slid my textbook beside it, spine strong under my thumb, and heard Ki-seok arguing softly with Yeojin in the kitchen about whether the expensive eggplant crime painting should be replaced by one of hers. He was losing, though he did not know it yet. I went to join them, leaving the 2 books side by side in the lamplight, one made for escape, one made for language, both finally belonging in a room where doors stayed open.